Let's talk about the grip. How you hold the golf club is one of the most important things you can learn to do well if you want to play good golf. Today we'll discuss some of the options you have around hand placement, and we'll also talk about grip pressure, which is a subject which often gets misunderstood. Should you grip tight or should you grip light? I think when it comes to the grip, it's fair to say there's no one perfect way to do it. You only have to look on the driving range on the PGA or LPGA tour every week to notice a variety of different grips from elite golfers. However, that isn't to say that there are no rules and you can simply hold the club however you want. I'm going to highlight some areas of the grip, the hands in particular, that I think can unlock some real benefits to your golf game. The Golfing Machine book discusses the grip in great detail and talks about grip points, pressure points, and grip pressure in a way that gives a comprehensive overview of some of the things you would want to try to do with your hands. When placing them on the club, I want to highlight pressure point number 1, which sits on the meaty pad or the thumb pad of the trail hand. Pressure point number 2 is a little bit of poetic license for me here. I like to talk about the heel pad of the left hand as well as the index finger, the knuckle of the index finger on the lead hand as well. And then pressure point number 3, which is this joint, the second knuckle of the trail hand. How you position these points on the grip plays a significant role in how well you can grip the golf club. I want to use this close-in view for the majority of the video here so that you get to see clearly how these hands are being placed on the club. So we're going to take that lead hand to start with, the top hand, and we're going to place the heel pad, this number 2, this large number 2 I've written on my heel pad of my hand, on top of the grip. Okay, so that's gone on top of the grip. And then in the fingers, the way I'm going to hold this thing is that I'm going to rest the shaft through the fingers of my hand. And to the point where this second little number 2 that I've drawn on the middle knuckle, the middle joint of my index finger, is the piece that's gripping or supporting this grip and this shaft from this angle in this view right here. So the number 2 pressure point can be a combination of feeling that the heel pad of the lead hand is pushing down, it's on top of the grip, and at the same time that this is pushing down, this knuckle, this forefinger or index finger is pulling up. It's called the number 2 pressure point because it's associated with the second power accumulator in the Golfing Machine book. And the second power accumulator is the hinging and unhinging of the lead arm. So that's where it gets its name or its number from, and that's how you should position it on the golf club. From this front view, some of the checkpoints you would see as you look down at your hand would be that you're visibly able to see 3 knuckles, which would be the majority of the back of your hand is turned towards you, and that the thumb doesn't sit on top of the shaft. That's quite a common misconception about the grip. See lots of people with the thumb going straight down the shaft, and I can understand why people would think that. It seems quite logical. People like to have this sort of symmetry when they look down. However, that's not going to work. We need to make sure the grip's more in the fingers, the pressure points are in place, and in doing so, this thumb sits slightly to the side of the shaft. If the top of the shaft was 12 o'clock and the side of the shaft here was 3 o'clock, I'll tell you that this thumb's sitting somewhere in between. Now that we've successfully placed the lead hand on the club, let's introduce this trail hand. We've got 2 pressure points to take into account. Pressure point number 1, the meaty pad of the thumb, which is going to quite simply slot on top of the thumb of the trail hand. So that pressure point of the pushing of the pad here, the meaty thumb pad, is going to push down on top of the thumb of the lead hand. And with pressure point number 1 in place, pushing on top of the shaft, I'm going to close the fingers around the grip, paying particular attention to pressure point number 3, which is this trigger finger and this second knuckle. The knuckle here, the second knuckle of the trail hand, is really pressed against the side or the back side of the shaft. That helps you to sustain some pressure, some lag pressure throughout the swing where this trail knuckle, this index finger and the trail hand, the knuckle joint is pushing against the back of the shaft. Really, really key pressure point. Probably the most important one if you look at expert players and how they place that number 3 pressure point on the backside of the shaft to help them sustain some lag and create those impact alignments that make all those expert players expert. And now that we have the hands in place, we'll spend a little bit of time discussing how to join your hands together. There's 3 very common schools of thought on this in terms of how to join the hands on the grip. This first one I'm demonstrating would be referred to as the baseball grip. Sometimes it's called the 10-finger grip, where the hands aren't technically joined at all. They're just touching. This grip's fine, and it typically is one that gets picked up a lot by beginner golfers and lots of junior golfers as well. I don't have a particular preference for this grip, but I would say if you choose to use this grip, try to ensure that you keep your hands as close together as possible. You don't want to start having the hands split on the grip, because that starts to cause some problems with club face control. So the baseball grip is a perfectly viable option. So just make sure the hands, whilst not joined, are touching. Second option here would be called the overlapping grip, or the Varden grip, named after the famous golfer Harry Varden. And the Varden grip describes how the little finger of the trail hand here sits in between the index finger and the middle finger of the lead hand. This is just allowing the hands to sit together and be a tighter unit. This is probably the most popular grip on the tours among elite players, and it's probably the grip I see used the most. It's the one I'm using, and it tends to be a very popular way for you to join your hands. But note that all of these options, all of these grip options or variations are open to you. So I would be trying to find the one that is the most comfortable whilst making sure you have the pressure points in place. Third option for joining your hands would be called the interlocking grip. Now the index finger and the little finger here lock or link together. Doesn't look that different to the Varden grip, really, particularly from the top view. Nothing looks very different from the top view. From this underneath view, this grip tends to be chosen typically by people who have smaller hands. It tends to help to get the hands more onto the club. Interestingly enough, this grip was the chosen grip for golfers such as Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus, who in the men's game have been so dominant, you might wonder why more people didn't choose the interlocking grip. But once again, which of these options you choose is really up to you. Base it on comfort and base it on outcome of shot, and also just making sure that you're doing these variations while keeping those pressure points intact. Okay, so we've got our grip in place. I've added my glove here. I'm going to push that number 2 pressure point on the top and hook my index finger around the base of the shaft. Remember, this is very much a finger grip. Most golfers who struggle with the grip tend to hold it too much in the palm of their hand. Fingers, right through the fingers gets the pad on top, and the fingers of the trail hand helps to get the number 1 pressure point, the thumb pad, on top. One of the things you'll note from this front view as you look at my hands, a couple of things I would say are relevant. One is the fact the hands are very close together. There's very little space in between my fingers. There's very little space between the fingers and the grip. This is very tight, tightly connected to the grip itself, and the hands are tightly connected together. Another thing that you'll note when the hands are in the correct spot would be that the V that you create between your thumb and your forefinger, remember this position where the thumb's sitting in that angle to the side of the shaft. This V that we're creating between the thumb and the forefinger goes up towards my trail shoulder. That would be considered quite a neutral grip. And then when you place the trail hand on correctly, you'll notice that the thumb and the forefinger here, we create a similar looking V shape. That V and that line still runs up my trail arm towards the same spot. Both of those V's are pointing towards my trail shoulder. And with the hands now on the club correctly, I want to discuss grip pressure. This is a subject that's vastly misunderstood, in my opinion. Lots of instructional content has been put out on grip pressure over the years, talking about holding this golf club lightly. Some of the descriptions are to pretend you're holding a baby bird, and that you want to hold the baby bird tight enough that it won't fly away, but not to squeeze it so tight that you would kill it. Another description is holding a tube of toothpaste with the lid removed and swinging while holding that tube of toothpaste without any of the toothpaste squirting out. I can't think of two descriptions that could be further from the truth. I think golfers typically grip the club too lightly more than too tightly. But let me just give you my thoughts on this in terms of what I would prescribe. In my world, there's a difference between finger and grip pressure, how tightly I'm holding onto the club. Right now, you can't see this because you can't feel what I feel. But in terms of grip and strength in my fingers, I'm probably holding this at about a 8 or 9 out of 10. If you tried to pull this club out of my hands, you wouldn't be able to. So I'm holding the club tightly with my fingers, as I say, probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But my wrists and forearms still have all the degrees of freedom that they need. So I can hold this club tightly and have lots of strength while still having freedom and movement of the wrists. That's often misconstrued. When golfers overgrip and get too tight, they also completely tighten up their arms and wrists. So now they move or don't move correctly because they're so tense and tight. And I think that's where the idea of gripping the club lightly came from, to help golfers have a little bit more freedom within their wrist. But it's my belief, my strong belief, that you can have both. You can have the best of both worlds. You can hold this thing tightly while still having lots of freedom and lots of speed in your wrists to be able to create the power that you're looking for. One final thought on the grip before I let you go would be to tell you that it's not always necessary and sometimes not always optimal to have the same grip for all clubs and all shots. This grip I've shared with you today would be what I would consider a very neutral grip, and somewhere that I think would be a great place for you to start. But it may be the case that you need to have a slightly modified grip for certain clubs in your bag, whether that's the driver, requires a little bit more help of closing the face for many of you. And certainly in the short game, the chipping and pitching, my grip would look very different. I'd have both my left and right hand more turned to the left. Because what the grip really is, the grip is our contact with the club. And our contact with the club with our hands dictates how our wrists move and ultimately how we control this club face. So with my short game grip, turning both my hands to the left encourages me to have the face of the club ever so slightly more open than it would normally be. And in short game, that's a great thing to have because it allows me to hit those shots a little higher, a little softer, without having to make other adjustments to my swing. So that's a comprehensive discussion about the grip, some of the pressure points and the hand placements that you'd be looking for if you want to improve your golf. And the grip pressure discussion is one that I really feel can add a lot of value to those of you struggling with how hard to grip the club. If you're able to take some of the ideas from today's video and apply them to your game, do let me know down in the comments how you get on. I'm particularly keen to hear from you about the grip pressure versus wrist pressure idea. That's something that I've seen become a complete game changer for some of my students, and I'd be really keen to hear how it helped you. Anyone looking to work directly with me on your golf game, you can find me on the Skillist app. I'll put the link down in the description. You can message me directly on there and we can connect about how you can improve your golf game this year. The grip and the wrist movements in the swing are inextricably linked together. So if you want to learn more about the wrists and how they work, go and check out this video next, which will describe some of the basic wrist movements that you should be looking for. Now, I'm off to wash my hands.